parties, substitution of candidates, and failure of parties to adhere to their constitution and timetable for the conduct of the election. Speaking during a presentation at a two-day capacity workshop for journalists in Akwanga, Nasarawa State, IMEX Director, Legal Drafting and Clearance, Mrs. Oluwatoyin Babalola, said pre-election litigation matters arose before the conduct of the 2023 election as provided for in Section 285, subsection 14 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended. She said most of the cases were born out of a lack of internal party democracy and the failure of political parties to adhere to their constitutions and guidelines. Babalola explained that the unique nature of pre-election matters could not be overlooked because judgments in that regard could negatively impact planning, logistics, funding, and certainty of participants in the conduct of the election. The INEC official, while delivering her presentation titled Effective Litigation on INEC's Preparations for Kogi, Imo, and Bayelsa governorship election, explained that those judgments were sometimes given on the eve of the election, thereby prohibiting INEC from conducting elections for certain positions, replacing candidates after the printing of ballot papers. Situations like this affects logistics and cause an eventual colossal waste of resources. Now, the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party in the 2023 presidential election, Atiku Abubakar, has again pleaded with the Supreme Court to ignore technicality and grant his application for leave to tender fresh and additional evidence to support his claim that President Bola Tinubu submitted a forged document to the Independent National Electoral Commission to contest the February 25 presidential elections. VOP News gathered that Atiku, in his reply to the point of law to Tinubu's objection to the grant of leave to present the fresh evidence before the Apex Court, submitted that issues of merit ought not to be determined or pronounced upon at the interlocutory stage. He argued that the Supreme Court has intervened time and time again to do substantial justice in such matters of great constitutional importance, as it did in the cases of Amechi versus INEC in 2008. Atiku also argued that the presentation of a forged certificate by a candidate for the highest office in the land is a very grave constitutional issue that must not be encouraged. He said that if the Supreme Court grants his application, there would be no need for any further argument other than the written address in support of the same, showing that Tinubu is in violation of the provisions of Section 137, subsection 1J of the Constitution by presenting a certificate disclaimed by the institution from where he purportedly procured same. Atiku said, and I quote, "The need to rebuff, eschew, and reject technicality and the duty of court to ensure substantial justice is very germane in this matter, given the gravity of the constitutional issue involved in deciding whether a candidate for the highest office in the land, the office of the president of the country, presented a forged certificate or not." Now, to talk about two possibly major issues in the world news at 6 today, I actually have right here in the studio Peter Anosike. Now, Peter Anosike is a social commentator, a political enthusiast, and also an analyst, a development strategist, and also an author. Peter Anosike, good evening and welcome to the World News at 6 right here on VOP 90.3 FM. It's quite an interesting one, you being here actually. There's quite a lot that is actually transpiring, and I want to start off with Babachir Lawal. You recall yesterday I asked you, okay, you were even the one I had a conversation with. I had a conversation with Mr. Darlington, and Babachir Lawal, you do know he had a case with the grass cutting process where he spent millions of naira
35 million naira
to cut grass.
Yes.
Wow, that is actually wild if you consider that. Now, apparently, yesterday he said that Peter Obi was the winner of the February 25 presidential elections, and his cited instances, according to him, he said he has been trying to recuperate and get better with his health because critics asked, where were you all this while, and why have you not said anything concerning, the entire election process up until now? So other critics have also alleged the fact that possibly because he did not get any political appointment with this particular administration, so he seems to be quite a little bit, sort of angry or not content with where he currently stands. Well, he said that some APC persons reached out to him, and I want to read out some things that he said. He said, I woke up this morning to a very pathetic social media trending write-up, apparently a response to my article on the current political discourse by one Felix, allegedly for the APC. He said he suspects he was assigned this role because it is in the nature of... There are some derogatory words that he used. It is in the nature of some persons and people consigned to second-class status to be assigned roles that their masters are wary of taking on. He said, usually the dirty, unsavory jobs are contracted out to such. I really do sympathize with a Christian, or is he not, who finds himself in an Islamic party and is desperate to please his masters and probably to be noticed when the next round of political appointment comes. And he went further to give a lot of, supposed derogatory comments in response to what the APC representative Felix Moka said concerning what he divulged, or the avalanche of what he divulged yesterday. What's your take?
Well, for me, he described Moka as an outsider.
Okay.
And I quite agree with him that Moka is an outsider, and he's a messenger in the party, because on and on I've not heard that Felix Moka in APC.
Okay.
So he is, as Baba Chia say, he's an outsider. So he's just a messenger saying what he was asked to say.
All right.
But this guy didn't pull punches. He still maintained his statement.
All right.
People had expected him to kind of be recanting.
Oh.
But he didn't, which means he is convinced in what he said yesterday. Others will have said, I was misquoted. Understand? I was misquoted out of context. But he still insisted on what he said yesterday, that it will be one day election. I don't know where he gets his facts, but with his personality, he has more information more than many other people in the country.
All right. So let's look at this particular one that actually caught quite a lot of attention. Nadeko has dragged the president to ECOWAS over alleged certificate forgery. And I remember when I had this conversation with you, you said something that made me laugh. You said, does the ECOWAS, do they have any prison?
They don't have prison. So ECOWAS court, to me, is mere ceremonial.
Okay.
Every court should have prison where they sentence convicts.
So in other words, whatever letter they're writing to ECOWAS will be ineffective.
It's ineffective.
Okay,
it's
so let me just read out what they said. They said that they urged the regional body to probe the allegations concerning Tinubu's certificate from the Chicago State University. And they actually stated that it is morally questionable and globally embarrassing for a president facing such allegations to hold such prominent position within our regional organization. And the letter was written and it read, I write to you on behalf of Nadeko USA, a pro-democracy group dedicated to the preservation and promotion of democratic values in Nigeria and the West African sub-region. They're also saying they wrote in a capacity as concerned corporate citizens of the West African region, deeply committed to the principles of justice, transparency, and integrity that are fundamental to the success of their esteemed regional organization. They said that it is quite important for them to look into the CSU certificate allegation on President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, as it does not quite represent that particular organization well, with a lot of questionable, anomalies that surrounds the president. And they also stated that the recent reports and allegations regarding the conduct of the president, the current chairman of ECOWAS, has cast a shadow over the credibility and integrity of him, and by extrapolation, ECOWAS, the organization. They also said that it has become public record that the president has been involved in serious allegations, which include certificate forgery at the Chicago State University and other drug-related offenses in the United States of America. However, they are calling respectfully upon the organization to initiate a serious and thorough investigation into the allegations surrounding the president. And you said something Or what use would such investigation be to the president? And at what point would they do anything?
Nadeko asked them to probe. After probing, what would they do with it?
Probably the one who to step down from being the ECOWAS chair.
Because Nigeria is like big brother in Africa.
Okay.
Whatever is happening in Africa, Nigeria brings out the resources. So you don't see other countries giving orders to Nigeria or Nigerian president.
All right.
I remember during Obasanjo's tenure, there was a president from the one of the Southern African countries. He was on a visit to Nigeria and there was a queue in his country. Obasanjo, with a phone called the head of state of that junta to hand over power to this man. He told that the president, who was on a visit to Nigeria, go back and take over your position.
All right.
And it happened that way. So that now shows you the difference between Tinubu and Obasanjo. Understand? The pedigree, the reputation that Obasanjo has, Tinubu don't have it. And that was why throughout his 7 years in office, there was no 8 years, there was no queue anywhere that he is in. But with the allegations against the president, he is still presiding over ECOWAS because he is now the image maker of ECOWAS.
Interesting.
He is the image maker of ECOWAS. And if the brand of the image maker is not okay, that the brand that he is represented wouldn't have any credibility. So that could be on that ground that Nadeko is writing to ECOWAS.
Yes.
That you are number one citizen, your image maker, his brand is now negative.
All right.
So he still presiding over you. It's just like when one finger is stained with oil, the other fingers automatically become stained.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so let's look at the situation like this where the U.S. State Department and Consulate Office in the UK, they are verifying that Tinubu was deported from the United States in 1994. Other critics believe that that was not the case. He wasn't deported. We recall that that was the period where he had the issue with the money that he had to pay at the time to abdicate from the drug-related matter. That's one. Also consider as well that at the time, although there were no clear evidences as to what his activities were in 1994 in the UK, but these reports are possibly emergent since they're investigating or for asking questions about the president's past in the United States, in the United Kingdom, and other foreign countries that he has a lot of affiliates and properties on or whatnot. You recall that the FBI too is supposed to release some documents pertaining to the president. It was supposed to be released this month, but we haven't seen anything yet.
The month is still beginning now.
Okay, so we're still expecting to see.
I think they say 500.
2,005 to 500 every month. And it should cover the space of 4 or 5 months for all of these materials to be brought out. But however, in light of this particular situation, apparently the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party has actually written to the Supreme Court to please avoid any form of technicality while they're dispensing justice. And I want to read out what he actually said. He's actually stating categorically that it is quite important for the Supreme Court to make sure they do the needful when it comes to this particular appeal from the opposition political parties as regards President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's win on the presidential elections that occurred on February 25. Now, he's pleading with the Supreme Court to ignore the technicality, grant his application for leave to tender fresh and additional evidence to support his claim that President Bola Tinubu submitted a forged document to the Independent National Election to contest the February 25 presidential election. You recall that about a few days ago, the legal team of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu wrote to the Supreme Court asking them not to allow, especially that of Caleb Westberg, the fresh appeal gotten, not to allow that appeal or the fresh motion for that appeal to be considered at the Supreme Court. Now, is it surprising to see that Atiku Abubakar is writing for that particular appeal to be admitted and for technicality to be put aside? What's your take on what he's appealing?
Well, for me, the legal team of Tinubu don't have any power to tell the judges at the Supreme Court what to do and what not to do.
Okay.
So there are juries. They have been there. They know if there are legal precedences to what they want to do. Okay. So telling them accept this and don't accept that does not hold water. They should know what to do. Then on the issue of technicalities is a crime against justice.
Okay.
Technicalities is a crime against justice. So judgments are passed by evidences before the court. And that is what, and when verdicts are passed that way, people acclaim it, people hail it, because it becomes a popularity opinion. But when you go on technicalities, you are trying to dodge facts of the matter. So that's why I say that technicalities is a crime against justice. So for me, if there are precedences of Supreme Court taking fresh evidences and the articles legal team meet those requirements, Supreme Court should accept their fresh evidence.
That's quite an interesting one to look at. But a couple of legal practitioners who have actually made their comments concerning this particular development has said there is a strong evidence, or there is a strong tendency that the Supreme Court may align technically, just like the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, to more of in terms of moral and what exactly the entire debacle surrounding the president. For example, we do know that recently an amount of money was approved to be disbursed to Nigerians, and questions were asked as to the validity of that amount of money being disbursed. The questions are, for example, what is the format that will be used in ensuring that all and sundry that is required to have access to the money gets it? What data would be employed to ensure that these individuals actually get that amount of money? That's one question that was asked. For example, it's about 1.3 trillion naira for the poor people. These are palliative measures that will be used to alleviate the sense of poverty they're going through. And so other critics believe that there are other measures that would have been deployed for the proper utilization of those funds, rather than saying you want to directly give it to them. What is a mechanism for dispersing that money? How will the monies accurately get to the people that is intended to? Will they do it physically, or will they actually have to do it through the banks? How do they categorize how many poor people have bank accounts? These are the questions being asked. What's your take on it?
Well, for me, dispersal I have said it over and over that's a big scam.
Okay.
It is a big scam. The Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs has become a conduit pipe to be siphoning Nigerian resources.
Okay.
Because there's no accountability, there's no audition. To start with, how did they get that number? How did they arrive at that 15 million people that they are going to give? What are the mechanisms that they used to get that figure of 15 million that is going to give them 61 million? This is 15 million households, understand? Which, according to them, will give them 61 million Nigerians, which means they have known the number in each household.
Okay.
How did they arrive at, how did they get those numbers? What are the requirements for qualification? If they are the poorest of the poor in Nigeria, which means poorest of the poor in Nigeria have bank accounts. Understand? I know that my mother in the village don't have bank account.
All right.
Understand? I know how I send money to her. So how did they get? Because they said they'll be doing a transfer.
Okay.
Which means they are literate, one. They are literate and they have bank accounts and they also have phone numbers.
All right. So let me reel you back into the appeal written by articles of the Supreme Court. He's seriously pleading, it's quite a very long one in his plea. He said it will be important for the Supreme Court to admit it, that if not for anything, there'll be no need for any further argument other than the written address in support of showing that Tinubu is in violation of the provisions of sections 137. I know you're not a legal practitioner, but let's look at the moral capacity of his plea to the Supreme Court. Do you think at any point in time that this plea will be really considered? Or do you think some inclinations, that is some possibly executive inclinations, would induce or possibly, influence how they go about the proceeding, concerning this particular case? Because if you need to morally look at it, some persons would say something needs to be done rather than allowing such kind of abnormality to hold sway or become the norm in this particular administration.
Well, the truth is that court doesn't concern itself with the morality of an argument,
all right,
or morality of a situation. Understand? What is concerned is the weight of an evidence. Understand? So morally, a lot of things has been exposed. So whether court admits fresh evidence or not, Nigerian president can never be the same again. Even not accepting it will not change anything in the minds of the people everywhere in the world. It's not going to change anything. And what they mean that if it's accepted, it's just that it becomes an open and closed case. No further argument.
Right.
Because that particular report stated everything.
Okay. All right, Peter Anosike, thank you so much for your time on the World News at 6. I sincerely appreciate your time and your intellectual input on the World News. In order for us to wrap up the World News, here again are the top stories. You heard that Nateko has dragged President Tinubu to ECOWAS over alleged certificate forgery. Ex-Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Babachir Lawal, hits APC spokesman. INEC discloses they were being faced with over 1,000 pre-election litigations, and Atiku pleads with Supreme Court to ignore technicality, accept fresh evidence against Tinubu. That's a wrap on the World News at 6 right here on Voice of the People, 90.3 FM. My name is Esther Wachuku. Good evening and thank you for staying with us. Up next is the Evening Rush with Precious.